Well, I decided to talk about two books by Rachel Held Evans. One of them is A Year of Biblical Womanhood, and the other one is Inspired. And sometimes the way I hear about people is because they die. So when someone dies and there's a huge amount of articles about them, in all the papers that I read, like Christian Century and the New York Times and Houston Chronicle, if I see an article, a big article
We'll
about
check the.
Oh, be sure to mute yourselves. Anyway, so that's how I found out about this author. What really interests me too is all the articles said how much people love her. So, that also really got my attention. And it was particularly people who are not Christian or who have given up on Christianity. So, I'm very curious to hear about this. So the first one I looked at is The Year of Biblical Womanhood. And at first I thought, I'm not going to like this because I feel like it's like making fun of Christianity. And but then when I read it, I had a completely different impression about it. So that's the first one I'm going to talk about. Whoops. Is that the second slide? No, it's not. How about that? Got it.
Yeah. Just right there.
Okay.
Corner.
Okay,
And
just
then
the
I'm gonna
little
move it
corner.
right here.
Okay, got it.
That's forward, and then it's that little left corner.
To tell you a little bit about her, she was born in, she grew up in Dayton, Tennessee, which she calls one of the notches in the Bible Belt. And this is where the William Jennings Bryan trial, the Scopes trial, what happened. She grew up as a Southern Baptist, so did I. She loved the Bible growing up. She loved to memorize it and spent so much time, putting on plays with all her friends about Bible stories. She loved it. Then she got a degree in English literature from the William Jennings Bryan College. And as she became, after college, she began to have a lot of doubts about the Bible. Why so much genocide? Why so much violence? Why so much inconsistency throughout the Bible? That those things begin to really gnaw at her. But what I'm so impressed about her is she didn't give up on it. She decided, I'm going to dig in. So she's a very serious researcher. So she did a lot of research, not just Christian scholars, but also Jewish scholars. And just very sad to say that she died at the age of 37. She went to the hospital and she got an antibiotic that she was allergic to, and she died. So there's so much that she could have told us. You can see, pardon?
She had two small children at the time.
Yes, yes, children too. So you can see from her title, her subtitle, how a liberated woman found herself sitting on the roof, covering her head, and calling her husband master. So I like the graphic on there. She is sitting on her roof and she's got her head covered. So she got a contract to spend a whole year as a biblical woman, which is trying out all the things in the Bible about women. And one reason she did this is she's really wanting to know, does the Bible present a role model for women? She's also reacting to things from her own church. The idea that the perfect woman is a Proverbs 31 woman. And I know growing up in the Baptist church, that was certainly presented. That is the huge, not in your head, Beverly. And so another thing was she was a reaction to a statement from the Southern Baptist Convention and from John Piper that feminist ideology is a threat to biblical authority. So a lot of us would phrase that. That feminist ideology definitely might be a threat to the patriarchy. So, but she didn't know any of that. She's reacting to what she's hearing in church. So here's one of her statements. In the evangelical Christian subculture, there are 3 people a girl's got to know about before she gets her period. Jesus, Ronald Reagan, and the Proverbs 31 woman. So in her college, apparently the young men were just really hoping to marry a Proverbs 31 woman. And the young women would have meetings to talk about how can they be a Proverbs 31 woman. So she's beginning to think about all these things that she's heard. The book is real interesting the way it's organized. She organized it into months of the year. And each month she has a different thing or a bunch of things she's doing related to women in the Bible. So this is her month of January. Will the real Proverbs 31 woman please stand up? And here's some statements she has. And yet many Christians interpret this passage prescriptively as a command to women rather than an ode to women. With the home-based endeavors of the Proverbs 31 woman cast as the ideal lifestyle for all women of faith. So with her literary background, she's reading this and says, this is a poem. That's not a prescription. And so another thing is, she talked to Orthodox Jewish women and asked them, what do you think the Proverbs 31 woman is about? And they said, well, it's a benediction. Every Friday night during services, we sing it to the woman of the house to thank them for all they do. So that's a very different interpretation of what Proverbs 31 can be. Old Testament scholar Ellen Davis notes that the poem was intended not to honor one particularly praiseworthy woman, but rather to underscore the central significance of women's skilled work in a household-based economy. So she's saying this is a very wealthy Near East woman, and yeah, I think she didn't say that, but it's not a prescription for the rest of us. Okay, she's gonna do this. So here's her to-do list, or her thinking about it. So each of these is set to a Bible verse. She's got to get it before dawn because she gets up while it is still dark. So some of the things, she's got to make every meal and keep the house clean because the verse says she provides food for her family. She's going to have to do something nice for her husband. She does it good, not evil. I really love the next one about she's got to avoid TV, Facebook, and Twitter because she does not eat the bread of idleness. So and she's got to keep working until 9 p.m. Her lamp does not go out loud. And then here is my favorite. Oh, no, not yet. Okay. So look at all the things she's going to have to do in the month of January. A lot of people, men and women, don't know how to sew. You know, younger people. I know, that's gone. That's way gone. It'd be very unusual for women for men or women to know how to sew now.
Even learn this YouTube videos.
Yeah. Yeah,
But you can't because you are not supposed to have Twitter, YouTube.
Oh, there-
yeah, you can't do that. Okay.
Not the Proverbs 31 one, but everybody else.
They're not.
She's got to make a purple dress and knit a red scarf and make pillows. And she's got to make linen garments. She's got to open her arms to the poor. And one of my favorites, she's got to make Martha Stewart's chicken curry because she is like merchant ships bringing her food from afar. Okay, now here's my very favorite. She has to praise her husband at the city gate. Okay, so what you're seeing is a picture of a billboard in Dayton. It says, "Welcome to Dayton." And this little person here is her. She's holding up a big sign praising her husband, Dan. So She's doing it. There's just one more chapter I want to go through, even mention, is because it's quite funny too. In April, it's the worst month of the year to go camping. So during her menstrual period, she camps out in a tent in her front yard. So observe the Levitical purity laws by undergoing 12 days of ritual impurity demonstration. So she's there, she is camping out. You know, if I just showed you this, it would give you the idea that this is a big joke book, but it's really not at all. It's very serious. Okay, I lost it. Here it is. So basically, an understanding that the women in the Bible are so many different people. You know, they're courageous, they're preachers, they're prophets, they're heroes, they're loyal, they're brave. So, you know, she has no doubt now that she can talk very authoritatively that there is no perfect woman described in the Bible. And talking about this being a lot more than humor is like her contemplative prayer. She learned that during this year. She went to stay in a monastery. And she found it so helpful because her personally is somebody whose brain just can't calm down. You know, it's always planning the future, planning the future. And of course, she's a young person, you know, so this is just working her head off about the future. And she found various types of contemplative prayer. She could slow her brain down. And also there were discussions in some chapters about what charity is and how justice is different from charity. In Judaism, there isn't a word for charity. She said she became much more appreciative of her husband, who really had to put up with a lot. He particularly didn't like, she would go grocery shopping with him, and she'd walk 10 feet behind him with something cover her head, calling him master. I was really embarrassed by some of her. And then also, it made her decide she's going to continue to fight, to find relevance in the Bible.
You think that she like used so much humor because the only other option was anger?
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet. Thank you for discussing my next slide. But let me figure out if I can go back. Yes, this is not her quote, but it's one that I just love. It's Mark 20. Against the assault of laughter, nothing can stand. There's almost nothing more effective than pointing out how this silly something is. That's all I have on this book before I start the new one. Anybody? Any comments you want to make? For a few days, yes. For a few days. Yeah. And that reminds me of another topic that's very interesting to me, is the topic of modesty and what that might mean. You know, a lot of times we think that means something about sexuality. But she asks, again, Orthodox Jewish women, what does modesty mean to you? And it means, I'll try to summarize it, that you're not so accessorized that people can't tell who you are. That somehow you should be able to yourself be shown to the world. So it has a different meaning. And she also asks Amish women, come in. She asks them, what do they think modesty means? And it means simplicity. That simplicity is just a very important value to them. So that might mean, modesty might mean, okay, you have 2 dresses for summer and 2 dresses for winter. So this means simplicity.
She was around the time that book came out. I think she was interviewed on
Probably.
for a long interview.
Okay.
And it's really good. And you get the whole, like, you're describing it really well because she comes across exactly.
She's just an
She does
amazing.
it's really funny and interesting, and her takeaways are worth hearing.
I found that just amazing about her is she can synthesize so much scholarly information, and then she can add her own views to that and use humor when she needs to, but I found that's just an astonishing trait of hers. No. Okay,
How old was she when she wrote that?
I don't know.
Her 20s?
Just a second, we're gonna see.
Oh,
Published in
Should
2018.
be about 30,
He died at age 37.
Yeah.
37, and it was in
So probably late 20s.
2012, so yeah, she's about.
I like her subtitle for this too, Slaying Giants, Walking on Water, and Loving the Bible Again. Sorry, I usually use a mouse, and so I'm struggling right now. I think they told me it will work. Here is the contents of her book, and to me, this is fascinating. My own background is English literature, although I didn't teach. I was more of a technical writer at Compact Computers for a lot of years, so writing. But what I think she has done is like if you gave a really good literature professor the Bible, say, why don't you read this? What do you think? And this is exactly what she would say. Let's organize it into literary genres. And so that's what she's done. Stories of origin, deliverance, war stories, wisdom, resistance stories, gospel stories, fish stories. I thought fish stories, and it's like, well, of course. Moby Dick, the old man in the sea, of course. Okay, and there wasn't space for church stories. That's also another one. I'm going to give you what I think her summary is first before I go through it. That stories have enormous formative value. They shape who we are. And I particularly love this quote. There is no such thing as just a story. Stories always have a meaning. This is not her quote, the next one. I wish I could remember who said it, but I was so impressed. A myth is something that may have happened and happens all the time. So with your Jonah and the whale, like, okay, that didn't happen, maybe. But it has a meaning that maybe if you have a sense of God's will for your life, you will be pursued by God. So it has, completely.
That's a problem.
Probably.
Okay,
That would be a good guess. Come in. And to me, almost this was the most powerful thing about the book. I'll have to say that I've never done this, and I'm kind of shocked. If we can associate our own life stories with Bible stories, we have a powerful support for understanding our own lives and coping with their lives. I mean, as much as I love Bible verses, I really don't sit down and say, wow, that's just like this thing happened to me. And you see how valuable it can be to do that.
It's an argument, I think, in the last chapter that the purpose is to tie your narrative to a bigger narrative.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
It's kind of on that same line.
Okay, for our little humor break here. This is me using Ron's bird books to figure out how I'm going to copy text from a printed book. Okay, the other one was a digital. Womanhood was a digital book. And even there, the publishers make it as hard as they can for you not to be able to copy it. They'll let you copy like a few sentences here and there. So that's
You can
fine.
do it in Kindle.
Okay,
If you have a Kindle version of a book, you can do a copy paste.
big passages?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's an
So,
iPhone feature you're gonna love that we can show you later.
okay, well, in fact, I was going to tell you, there's a lot of people told me, I can help you with this.
You found your way.
But I'm like, nah, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to, hopefully it's not too distracting.
Well, after she's asked me a few times. So.
He's like, stay away. Please stop.
I love it, Linda.
Okay.
Love your message.
Yeah, because, okay, so I took a picture of it, and then I emailed the picture to myself, and then I copied it to Word, and then it will allow me to. Well, isn't that interesting? Okay, so I hope it's not too distracting. Text things. But there's so much I thought I would just read to you because that really tells you what her thoughts are for me commenting on it. Citing G.K. Chesterton, author Neil Gaiman often noted, fairy tales are more than true. Not because they tell us that dragons exist, but they tell us that dragons can be beaten. In those first formative years of my life, before I knew or cared about culture wars or genre categories of biblical interpretation, this is what scriptures taught me. That a boat full of animals can survive a catastrophic flood, that seas can be parted and lions tamed, that girls can be prophets and warriors and queens, that a kid's lunch of fish and bread can be multiplied to feed 5,000 people. At times I wonder if I understood my sacred text better then than I do now or ever will again. My aim with this book is to recapture some of the Bible magic, but in a way that honors the text for what it is: ancient, complicated, debated, untidy, both universally relevant and born from a specific context and culture. So this is in the introduction of the book, and it's very interesting to me that when I read an introduction to a book and start marking everything, it's like, okay, stop marking, okay, the whole introduction. The adventure, quote, wrote Rabbi Burton Vitosky in reading the book, lies in learning the secrets of the palace, unlocking all the doors, and perhaps catching a glimpse of the king in all his splendor. Renowned New Testament scholar N.T. Wright compares scripture to a 5-act play full of drama and surprise, whereas the people of God are invited into the story to improvise the unfinished final act. Our ability to faithfully execute our roles in the drama depends on our willingness to enter the narrative. There you go, Lucky. He said, to see how our own stories intersect with the grander epic of God's redemption of the world. Every page of scripture serves as an invitation to wonder, to wrestle, and to surrender to the adventure. This is to show you how much reading she has done to write this book. This is her notes just for chapter 1. So she's read from scholars, from literature like John Didion, Madeleine L'Engle. So just this is just chapter 1. So the book is worth it if you just want to see some interesting variety of readings. Some bipolar faith, a Black woman's journey with depression and faith, is extremely broad reading. Fish stories. Activist Shane Claiborne likes to challenge Christians to not only believe in miracles, but to live in a way that might necessitate one. Indeed, the people in my life who seem the most convinced of the reality of miracles are exactly the people who take the message of the Bible's miracles to heart. Hospital chaplains, food pantry directors, addiction counselors, relief and development workers, nursing home volunteers, foster parents. These folks witness a whole lot of heartbreak from unmet needs and seemingly unanswered prayers. They are neck deep in it. But their proximity to the suffering and marginalized means they occasionally glimpse the miraculous of limited rations multiplying like fishes and loaves, of centuries-long tribal suspicions melting away over a meal, of storms, natural and man-made, suddenly calmed by the presence of Jesus, of donations and care packages arriving at exactly the the right time. I like how Dallas Willard put it. We don't believe something merely by saying we believe it, or even when we believe it. We believe something when we act as if it were true. So perhaps a better question than do I believe in miracles is, am I acting like I do? Am I including the people who are typically excluded? Am I feeding the hungry and caring for the sick? Am I working to break down religious and political barriers that marginalize ethnic, religious, and sexual minorities and people with disabilities? Am I behaving as though life is more than a meaningless, chaotic mess, that there's some order in the storm? This is on the genre of deliverance. These testimonies may seem like small potatoes compared to the testimonies of Moses, Hagar, and Mary. But as counselors and neuroscientists continue to confirm, the ability to shape a narrative from your experiences and to connect your story to a greater one is essential for developing empathy, a sense of purpose, and well-being. In fact, some therapists have begun incorporating into their counseling sessions what professor and therapist Makungu Akinya termed testimony therapy, by encouraging clients to channel the communal, hope-driven spirit of Sunday morning testimony time. Every time we retell stories of God's faithfulness in the past, whether around a candlelit cedar table or under a bright red and white striped revival tent, we are reminded that if God can make a way for Moses and the Hebrew slaves, for Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, for the grandma living on Social Security, for an alcoholic marking 20 years sober, and for the strong and pregnant lady mumbling incoherently about rutabagas, then maybe God can make a way for me too. One more thing before this last sentence is, was something she absolutely loved about the fundamentalist churches she grew up in, was the idea of testimony. That people would say, you know, they didn't think they could pay their water bill, but somehow they could. Just how powerful and meaningful that was, as testimony. Storytelling has always been, and always be, one of humanity's greatest tools for survival. I'd like to hear comments of some of you who read these materials or. It's a lot to think about, isn't it? I found there's no way I could just sit down and just read this book. Yeah, I could put it down, think about it.
Reminds me of this. We had a course on which we had a course in modern history, taught by a woman who was in fact a PhD in English literature. And after teaching the class, she became an Episcopalian.
Well, that's what happened to Rachel Held Evans.
She hadn't been going to church before, but
Yeah,
after a year of teaching,
she decided there was something there. There's something there. And Rachel did end up being Episcopalian.
I just dropped a letter that I couldn't help but thinking about our own Bible play classes where the children really sort of ever enter Christian life for themselves. And
The power of that.
right, but also I had a conversation with Sister to write about Sunday school. In high school, I took that teacher who was in Missouri Synod. And at that point, I thought I was going to deny the rights of my own thoughts about the story. Shame is
Yeah, it definitely is.
I'm glad you followed the teacher. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I was surprised my sister remembered that.
And you see in Rachel's life that she acted out all those stories, and then there she is acting out all these women. So the importance of drama and art, of making you look at something from a little different view.
Well, to that end, she pointed
Speak
out.
up, y'all, if you're, for the folks at home.
Oh, yeah, to that end, she pointed out that at another place, where especially in the kind of conservative religious world, they interpret Jesus saying to come unto me like a little child, meaning to just shut up and listen to what I tell you. But that's not what children do. They ask you a million questions and they want you to explain everything over and over and over again. And then they ask you, well, why isn't it this instead then? And and she's like, we don't really, if we really engage the Bible like children, we would ask nothing but questions, it seems, right? So
I still remember when my former church in Honolulu, pastor said, we were gathering children during the service. It was always so cute at the end. He said, let us pray. And of course, my son jumped right in and led it. Like, okay.
Anybody on Zoom, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or give a comment. Even comments might even be better.
Well, I think this idea of deliverance, stories of deliverance, I guess I've always thought of the story of the Exodus and the fleeing of Egypt as the archetype deliverance story. But there are all other, if you think about this, there's a whole ton of deliverance stories in the Bible of people, of David being cornered in a cave, of all types of events where Paul escaping from basically a prison. The angels come and break the chains. There's, I guess I haven't tied all those together as a single genre of deliverance.
And how important that's been to various groups of people. Black Americans, people in Central America, are really, seeing, they know this because of deliverance stories and it empowers them.
And people dealing with addiction.
I read on Amazon the reviews because I was ordering the book and I got the book on Audible. So I always read the negative reviews as well as the positive. And people were just adamantly against this book.
Yeah, they're furious.
They're just absolutely, as you say, they were just furious. Our church bought this and, it was terrible that they did and all, And it's like, I always kind of think it's a bit like being an ostrich. Just stick your head in the sand and just, don't confuse me with anything, any other information. Because as you pointed out, she's going through and she's researching things. And we've been fortunate at Christ the King and other churches that I've been in to have really good biblical scholarship being brought to bear. And yet the Bible still stands. It's really, I just found it.
And it's interesting that she said when she first started the project, the amount of hate mail she got. But when she finished, she didn't care if people were mad or not. I mean, she knew what she knew, so she didn't care.
Well, she's attacking without attacking it, the whole book attacks, the whole idea of the book attacks one of the fundamental criteria, which is doubt is weakness. And you should have to just believe it because it's true. And you should, if you have doubts, you suppress them rather than explore them. And this is just the complete opposite.
And yet she does it in such a friendly voice.
Yeah.
It would take an effort to just hate her, Although some people accomplish that just fine, but she has very friendly tone.
I'm interested in the fish stories.
Okay.
Now, does she mean literally fish, or does she just mean the idea of miracles? And, I've been fishing and I guess I've experienced some miracles, some days it seems like a miracle if you catch a fish. Was that the idea?
Well, it was more about miracles. And just use those stories as a way to talk about, what are miracles. And like she said, that we just have to act like we do believe in it, that we believe in miracles and that, we can participate in miracles.
But there are remarks, as she pointed out, there's a remarkable number of stories about fish in the Bible. Like I had even forgotten about the one with the fish with the point in its mouth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
there's, I mean, they're so common, we don't even notice them anymore. When she started making a list of them, I was like, oh my God, she's right. There's a whole bunch.
And she brought out how the earliest Christian symbol is a fish.
Yep.
So, yeah.
For the fish.
More than the cross, well, as opposed to the cross, not just
Right.
story, but like instead of the cross as the main symbol, they
Yeah.
used the fish as the main symbol.
That the cross was much later.
Now, under Roman
Hundreds of
rule, that
years
probably
later.
made a lot more sense, you know, to pick a symbol that wasn't so directly tied to Roman execution.
That's exactly why. That's exactly
If the
why.
Lord's power made it.
Absolutely, that was the reason.
I have a question for you. That she does these little stories where she takes a biblical story and recasts it in a slightly different context, sometimes modernized, sometimes still somewhat ancient, but a different kind of retelling, as it were. It takes some liberties with the exact storyline and such, right? Which is,
Yep.
I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
My question is, what did you make of those
Yeah.
parts of the book, and how did you, what did you?
Apparently it didn't bother me or anything, but can you think of an example, one of you, of what story did she tell that's like, blah, blah.
Well, I didn't think they were off. I thought they were awesome.
Okay.
Walk on water.
Yeah, the walking on water
I
story
mean,
with the boat.
I found it a little bit jarring to change how you're presenting this information. I found it just a little bit jarring that she switched to a drama all of a sudden.
Right, that was a choose your own adventure one.
Yeah,
yeah, Two different
choose your own
things.
adventure. But it always is interesting when something like that happens to you because you pay attention.
Mhm.
You know, it does it's kind of like in a sermon when a pastor will, you know, add an extra story or something, and all of a sudden you wake up and
Yeah.
you're paying attention. So I just have mixed feelings about how the poetry thing, and it was just, it's almost like stream of consciousness that she was going through.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
she's thinking about this stuff, and then she goes off on a little bit of a tangent, and it's like a meditation of thinking about it.
Oh, that's a good
I didn't
job.
think they all worked perfect, all that. A few of them
Yeah.
didn't work as well as you
Yeah.
might hope.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do a lot of this with the youth, like
Yeah.
taking a Bible story that's
Sure.
about something else and trying to find a way to see, can we kind of picture it, you know, and then let them make some choices, like, you know, what do you show in the background? What do you show in the foreground? The temptation is a good one because it comes up every year and it's great for kids to get into it. So like, is it really like an angel that promises an army, or does he hear the Roman army marching by? And that kind of sends his mind into thinking about maybe, what if I formed an army? You know, I mean, like, what's really going on? Can you do it without some of the harder to accept pieces of it so that you can get yourself into it a little better? Maybe it's not just God's voice. Maybe it's God's voice because of something else, or God's voice tied to something they see or something else they
Right.
hear, or something,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting. I liked it, but some of them didn't quite work as well as others, is what I
Okay.
thought, you know, but I would bet that's a part that makes a lot of people really mad.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, I
That's what made me
forgot
think of it.
something, a paragraph. I really hate that I forgot to put it up here. It was the different ways that people interpret miracles. You know, do they say, oh, it's totally metaphor? Or they come up with their science explanations of why this thing happened, you know, like walking on water because Jesus was on a sandbank. And you know, so it was just great about describing the different ways we look at miracles. And or do you think all these things really happen? You know, just a whole lot of different. Go ahead.
It's close to what I think about deliverance, which I'm reminded of stories about being lost at sea, shipwrecked, or a big storm coming up. And refugees that are in Europe. And my question is, we did the same thing happen back then. And if you made it just by coincidence, then you get that divine intervention of some sort, rather than just coincidence. We're at the shipwreck and so we're in one group for a few days. Is that divine intervention or just coincidence? And I suspect the same thing happened then when the Bible writers. But these deliverance stories. Once it didn't make it, they don't do it.
Yeah.
And why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a dilemma that I don't know if anybody has figured out.
She dives into some scholarship to help explain some of the miracles, not like physically, but maybe the purpose behind the stories, whether, and you can, she does a good job of helping you see how these three stories all put together kind of get at this point. And it might be a point deeper than the miracles themselves. And I had asked Matthias this before about like, what did a fact mean to someone at Jesus' time? It's like, oh, they had no facts. Like, there were things that happened, and there were things that you said happened because you wanted someone to believe a certain thing. But they didn't have this idea of facts, like an actual thing that really occurred that you could historically verify and prove.
Like we're struggling with right now in the US, right?
Yeah, perhaps.
Well, and I think the stories were written for the people's fans. I mean,
Yeah.
like
Yes.
any author, Paul or Luke or whatever, they're
That's right.
writing to the people they know. I'm sure they never thought 2,000 people, years
Right.
later, people with the internet are gonna read this and say, oh,
She has a wonderful
You know,
section.
which is.
Go ahead.
Like,
Because of our text.
about miracles,
So-
I mean, we assume uniformity.
Nobody
It's like a
believes
geologic principle. I'm spouting off.
That's a good point.
Like geologists believe in uniformitarianism. It means that processes that happen now have always been there. And so historians do the same thing. They believe in uniformity, like what we see today is actually what happened years ago. And so we have to circle around it. But there's no intrinsic reason why you would believe in uniformity in history, like you wouldn't believe that the parting of the Red Sea actually happened. There's no proof one way or the other on that. I mean, I'm just spouting off about it, but it's sort of like a scientific principle of uniformity that may or may not be reality in history when applied to ancient history. I mean,
That's a good comment. I'm also thinking about, she had some good comments about the literary form of letters. What is a letter? And at that time, why would you be writing letters, publishing them? And to really understand the difference.
Or
That-
were even written to be published.
Yes. Which ones are written, and you can, she said we quite often don't even pay attention to the verses that say, I'm talking directly to this church. So some of them have a very specific meaning. And also at that time, people wrote letters that they meant for everyone to understand. And so in the Bible, we have both those kind of letters. And she also said it's very interesting that, now I've lost my thought. Anyway, talking about the different meanings of letters.
Well, in Paul's letter, she said basically, right, especially the evangelical churches, but you ignore the verse that says, tell Mary thanks for letting me stay at her house last time I was there.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
That was
yes,
awesome. She
yes.
makes great food, and
Yes.
Back to the miracles thing, one of the things I marked that I thought was so revelatory, even, I'll say even to me, because I spent a lot of time thinking about this, but like beyond what I expected to find in the book, even more so surprising that way is, she says, what makes the Bible's miracle stories so compelling is the idea that God cares about people's suffering. Not simply their spiritual blindness or spiritual poverty, but also their actual blindness and their actual poverty. And that's her point. One of her points about miracles, I think, bigger is that it's that act like their true point. Like, if you believe that blindness is that only miracles can cure blindness, then we wouldn't have scientists studying how to fix blindness. If you believe that only miracles can solve poverty, we wouldn't have people working on food programs and trying to design more nutritious plants for people to eat and things that grow better in drought. Meaning we have the ability to fix some of these problems that miracles fixed back then. We should believe that God wants them fixed.
some of our solutions by any rational standard should be considered miraculous. You
They
know,
would be by the people who the Bible was originally written for.
yeah, I mean, and even for 99% of the population,
Right.
I mean, today, you know, for us personally, we have triplet grandchildren. When they were born, the smallest was 15 ounces. And by any stretch of the understanding of a miracle, it's a miracle she's around now.
And you're healthy at 12 years old, but yeah.
I mean, you know, so yes, it was the result of
Huge
all that
study.
care
huge
and
work.
everything, but,
Yeah.
you know, that's,
You're at the right place, the right time.
you know, I think,
Well, and the
I
lessons
think
learned.
we can, I guess, people can be the deliverers of miracles.
Right.
I mean, it's,
In a century of lessons learned, when that didn't go well.
right,
And so you realize this doesn't work, but let's try this, you know?
so it's, you know, I think in terms of the same thing with the stories of deliverance, that God cares. You know, there's some care, there's something's important, you know, about that situation. Paul's story in the shipwreck, you know, talk about people that survived these situations.
I like what the Pope said something like, you pray for the hungry, and then you feed them. That's how prayer works.
Exactly. Yeah.
How are we doing time on it? Oh,
Any other books of hers that you recommend?
I don't have a list of her books. She's read a huge amount of articles. She has several other books. I don't have a list, but you can certainly find them. I say she's one of a kind.
Yeah, that whole point about showing that God cares about all people. So therefore, if we are Christians, then we need to care for
Absolutely. I like the
everybody.
ELCA. It had a statement of we're God's hands.
Yeah.
I think it'd be worth commenting about her way of looking at the content of Paul's letters that the fundamentalists tend to use, she would say, the wrong way. You know,
Oh,
in terms of gender roles and in household structures and all
oh,
that
that
kind of
was
stuff. 'Cause that
so
seems to pick up a
interesting.
lot of
You can
people.
just talk about it if you want, or I can.
No, go
Okay,
ahead,
okay.
yeah.
She's looking at, I think it's called Roman household codes of what Rome was like. Everything was hierarchical. And so that was the structure. There's whoever's the head of thing, and then there in the family, the hierarchy is the man, and then the women and children and servants are down here. And she thought it was very radical that there would be anything written that a man should love his wife. And he would love him. So even though there's certainly negatives about his specific letters of please women quit talking, but overall that it was really Christianity was a pretty radical change that maybe if the family doesn't need to have such a hierarchy going.
Does she not realize that scholars feel that that passage was added by someone else?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
she doesn't go into that scholarship, but she deals with the fact, I think her purpose, she uses scholarship a lot of times, like she does a lot of N.T. Wright and a lot of other people in this area.
Did she learn Greek?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think she's more approaching, and I got the sense she's approaching it from it's in the Bible. And I don't have the time to explain how it got there for everything. I just want to give you she wants to give people who have some doubts and want to explore them, the permission to explore them and say, wait a minute, maybe this isn't exactly what meets the eye or what people will try to make it out to be.
Mhm.
Less than explain it Because, yeah, I mean, there's so many things like that there's just a lot of context, right? And it's funny because she puts in the story, you know, the kind of like, the story in that one that she kind of creates on her own is of an early church reading one of the letters, Colossians, reading one of the letters. And it's a woman that the letter is written to. So she's reading it out loud to the gathered Christians. And they're all sitting there together. Her own servant is sitting with her while they're doing Christianity together. So there's no hierarchy at the moment of Christianity. And the servants speak up, and the elderly people, women speak up. And she's gotten at the irony of all that, right? Like this.
That was true in ancient Greece though, right? During a ceremony, there was no hierarchy. Isn't that true? Like, I mean, like during a funeral. During a funeral, like in ancient Greece, if you buried somebody, the servant was pictured equal with the master or the homeowner. I mean,
No, I'm
Oh,
not actually.
you know. Oh, okay.
Well,
Okay.
the other thing in terms of the Bible, you get into, the Bible as we know it wasn't created until 7th century, several centuries later. So, what was included and what was excluded and all that is a reflection of,
Yep.
a bunch of people sitting around negotiating.
Yeah.
And, and making compromises and determining what fit at that time. So,
And she kind of blows over some of that stuff, honestly. I made a comment in the margin of like, she presumes that like, maybe it's because she presumes her audience will think this way, but she presumes that like, somehow God directed what ended up in the Bible instead of a bunch of old men. You know what I mean? Like kind of, and it was like, we could have just pointed out that people, some people decided what was in there or not.
Yeah, so they decided political.
Right, right. And that the canon is not something that was
well,
preordained by God.
as Lutherans, we believe that God worked through that there was some spirit inspiration, but we don't believe that it came down, from a mountaintop inscribed that, God was sitting there dictating to Luke as he was writing.
And she also, in the thing about the letters, pointed out how like even Paul's letters are inconsistent with each other. One explanation could be in a different part of the empire. One way of doing things could work, but in another part where there was maybe more police state, you couldn't quite do it that way, right? And so he was trying to keep a church alive
Well,
rather than trying to promulgate pure theology.
and
Yeah,
several
maybe it had-
people wrote using Paul's.
Yeah, right. A lot of letters aren't really credited to Paul, but not. Seems pretty clear weren't written by Paul.
And something interesting she said was, there's not another religion that's based on letters like ours is. That was just very interesting.
And that's true. I mean, I guess
That's a matter of time.
The time period it's developing,
The time of Paul is,
sure.
I would say, a fairly highly developed cultural
Yes.
system. Lots, not
Yes.
everyone can read and write.
Yes,
But it's like considerable number of people.
yes,
can.
absolutely.
Speaking back to what you were saying about who her primary audience is not audience of me growing up, because I really was taught, basically God held their hands and wrote this, and then every single word in this particular canon, it blew me away when I realized that, oh my gosh, there are other books that, are apocrypha and all this stuff. It was like, oh my gosh, it's horrible. But really, to her audience, to the Southern Baptist audience, to the Church of Christ audience, to any fundamentalist who are inculcated, this is God. Every word in here is exactly as he of course wanted it, and nothing else. And so I appreciate again what you were saying, Lucky. She gives you all the permission to doubt and to wonder, going back to what Vicki said about the play, that freedom to wonder, to apply it and be inspired by it, challenged by it, and live by it.
Bible study sessions do Baptist and
Every week, you're part of your Sunday school class, but
Yeah.
it is, I would say the difference in those kind of Bible studies is that this is what it means. You're basically told, and there's discussion, but it always comes back to.
It's only discussion about what they say it means.
Yeah, Sunday school, it was unwrapped for me. I know exactly what because you learn the Bible. I memorized so much scripture as a kid. But you learned that this Bible story meant this. This is what it meant. And it was a little room. But don't go to an adult forum with a teacher and then start asking questions that are not on the agenda.
Well, she brings
Because it
up
will not be welcome.
how different Judaism is. You know, she says in it
Yeah,
that
I like that.
fundamentalists think this is the end of the conversation, that verse.
Right.
And in Judaism, that means let's start arguing about that.
Exactly.
And I have a personal story. It's kind of funny. It's when Ron and I got married, we were going to decide what church we were going to go to. And so we went to one at Westbury Baptist, because it's certainly considered a Baptist church too. And it was Mother's Day. And here's what the pastor had to say. If God has something important to say, he's going to say it to the man. So I thought, well, we're with other people, so I don't think I'm going to get up and walk out and embarrass my friends. But, you know, another interesting thing, which you'll really understand.
That turned her into a loser.
That was it. Oh, yeah.
That one sermon, I've been working on it for a while.
How much did you pay him? You know, it just, this is something you'll really understand too. I also understand that was Baptist talk for a certain reason. They kind of beat up on the men because it was kind of saying, you men don't do enough. So it was really kind of insulting both people. So I understood that. It's Baptist talk for men get busy and do what you want to do. So let's say insult for men and women both. And then your dad called and said, oh, you know, David Royski was running from all this stuff. I think he's got a church over there somewhere near you. So that was that. So we're very happy to say
I have a story about the Bible that reflects to Linda's brother works in construction, traveled all over the world, building American cities. But they resettled back in this country, and they were going to go to church. And he raised Southern Baptist, and he was in a panic because he didn't have a Bible. You know, you cannot go to church without a Bible. So he had to rush around, I guess, go to Walgreens Sunday morning to buy a Bible before he went to church. You know, there was no way he was going to go to church without a Bible.
And there's wonderful things about Southern Baptist.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely wonderful, but they have a serious issue about disrespect of women.
And she,
You know,
and she deals with the selectivity of how they read the Bible too. Interestingly in this book, because she ended up in the Episcopal, of course, right? And she would get invited to homilies, she would call it, at churches all over the country. And she, of course, she had, like most traveling preachers, she has her stump speech or two and her few passages she loves to use. And then she started getting invited to kind of mainline lectionary based. They're like, okay, you preach on this instead. She's like, oh my God, that's a horrible story. I don't want to preach on that. How do I do that, right? And she said she had to deal with the whole Bible finally. You know what I mean? And it really kind of opened her eyes to thinking about the whole Bible, right? Much more than the cherry picking the parts that get across the points you want to make.
Every cherry pick. Every time, if you look at it, will say this verse to this, and then you skip 3 and do the rest. I might as well read those 3. And it's Jesus saying, you know, bad things about it. Jesus never said so. Jesus was always loved. So, you know,
She deals with one of those in here, like it's a beautiful psalm. And it takes us like three verse break to say, God, go ahead and kill all my enemies and like ruin their households, burn their house down. And then he goes back to this really nice God, you're my glorious Father, and you take care of me.
but see, there is, as I think the Jews make the point, he's not doing it himself. He's not going out and doing vengeance personally. You know, damn those people.
Right.
That's very different.
Yeah, and to the point of what Ruben or whatever, it's all liturgy anyway. It's meant to capture human thought, human emotion, and kind of recast it in a light.
It's a way of expressing your feeling without doing something.
Right, yeah, right.
But you need to get that. You know, the psychiatrist tell you kind of have anger suppressed turns into depression.
It's like, Jesus, why are you doing this to me? Oh, but if you're going to do it, do it. You know, like,
Well, maybe a little more emotion attached. I don't know, sweat, blood and tears, I don't know, but.
but you get the point though, right? Like, he's like,
Yes.
you sure, God? You really sure? Come on. There's gotta be a better way to do this.
Yeah, I mean, there's all these Old Testament passages where they're arguing with God, you know, it's, you know, and some of that is.
We have fun this Sunday.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming.
Well, yes, this is great. Thank you, Linda. Wonderful to have so many folks in a room together in conversation. It's very cool. And I know we can't do that, and everybody at home, we're glad you're with us. And we'll hope to see folks back next Sunday for Chair One.
Thanks for all your IT support.
Oh, no, that's great. Well, yeah. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Sometimes his little thing goes right here. Bye, everyone.
Thanks again, thanks again.
Bye, Linda. That was great.
Sounds good. Yeah, there's so much of it. It's hard to know. I was wondering how you're gonna pick what to talk about. Yeah. Because it's a lot.
Yeah, I can be a 6-week class.
Bye, everyone at
Yeah,
home.
that's a long class.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because you could really jump off into the references.